Hi, I'm Charles with AniCap. The story begins as a guy nervously rides on a train. When he gets off, he begins to run frantically, but he's found by a group that somehow knows his secret. This group covers the area in smoke, and the man shows his insane fighting skills as he fends off several attackers. The attackers launch several blades at this guy, so he pulls out a blade of his own to fight back. The attackers then use metal needles called senbon, but this guy has crazy reflexes, catching them with his teeth and firing them back at the attackers. Unfortunately, this man is overwhelmed by their sheer number. He is captured when a contraption takes hold of his neck, and he's dragged by a terrifying looking man. This evil guy slams the man into the ground and uses his sword to finish him off. The attackers use a device to confirm that their target has been eliminated, and they leave. Elsewhere, a farmer named Joe enjoys life on the farm and eventually returns home to work on his motorcycle. He plays a game with his young son Kyle, who tries to sneak up on him, and he tells the kid that he has eyes on the back of his head. Joe's wife Sarah shows up, and she can't believe how dirty Joe's face has gotten. Kyle explains that his mask is like the ones that the Oni wear, but they are really bad people. Joe warns him that the Oni might think that he is one of them, but Kyle is sure that his big strong dad will fight them if they come after him. Joe playfully says that he isn't sure if he can win against these fictional characters, but Sarah states that she will take them out for Kyle. Joe jokingly says that he has to hurry up and finish fixing his motorcycle for when Sarah gets in over her head fighting the Oni. Later, a news report details how the man from earlier lost his life, and Sarah seems concerned that it might actually have been the Oni. Kyle is certain that it was them, but it's time for this kid to go to bed. The kid says goodnight to his mother, and Joe reminds him that his birthday is coming up. With Kyle fast asleep, Joe diligently checks the security cameras he has around his house. Sarah is concerned because of how the man was eliminated, and what's even more bothersome is that no information was found about who he is. Joe tells her that there is nothing to worry about, and assures her that no one will find them out in the middle of nowhere. Sarah is most concerned about someone called the Reaper, but Joe explains that this can't be him since he always worked alone. The next day, we get a glimpse of how cautious Joe is about hiding their identity as he wipes away their fingerprints from a door handle. The young family then goes on enjoying their peaceful life like normal, and Joe does his best to be a good father as he cheers up his son. One night, it is reported that another person lost her life at the hands of a mysterious organization. This marks one of several that has occurred recently, so a large-scale investigation is underway to find out what is happening. On Kyle's birthday, the loving family enjoys a nice cookout. They all joke around while they sing songs, and Kyle blows out the candles on his favorite type of birthday cake. Kyle opens a present to reveal a video game, and Joe gives him a new helmet as well. Joe prefers this one over the scary Oni mask, so Kyle declares that he's no longer a bad guy, he is now a hero. Sarah points out that she just likes seeing his normal face, and the entire family shares a warm embrace. They couldn't be happier, so they all tell each other how much they love one another. That night, Joe gets up from bed, but he calmly tells his wife to stay there. Joe makes his way downstairs, where everything seems fine. Just then, something appears in the window, and Joe is attacked. The attackers barge in, but Joe masterfully fights several of them off. His exceptional skill allows him to take one of their weapons, and he uses his sword to eliminate several of these men. While he's destroying one guy, Joe hears his son cry out to him. The alert Joe instantly springs into action. He blocks an attacker who tries to stop him, and absolutely destroys this guy. Joe rushes to find his family as he reaches for something, but another attacker fires 2 metal needles right through his neck. The determined Joe refuses to let that stop him though, so he crawls up the stairs. The crippling pain overwhelms him, and we see a mysterious figure outside. Joe eventually makes it to the 2nd floor, where he finds that several attackers have been eliminated. However, Joe is then horrified when he sees Kyle and Sarah's lifeless bodies on the ground. Overwhelming shock fills Joe's body, and the evil-looking guy explains that Joe's wife put up a good fight. This monster sends his blade right through her neck, igniting Joe with blinding rage, but he is stabbed in the back. Joe drags the attacker as he tries to make his way to his family, but the damage to his body is too much to overcome. The attackers find that someone must have alerted the authorities, as police sirens can be heard in the distance. The leader confirms that Joe is no longer alive, so they leave just before the police arrive. The police arrive at the scene and are horrified to find the massacred family. Sometime later, the seemingly no longer alive Joe regains consciousness. His first thoughts are memories of his lifeless family, and he vomits solely from the overwhelming emotion consuming his body. The next time Joe wakes up, he is in a hospital, and the nurse urgently calls for a doctor. Joe only says his wife's name and he passes out again. Joe eventually wakes up and a doctor explains that he miraculously came back to life after the coroner had already pronounced him dead. Joe couldn't care less and just wants to know about his wife and son. Unfortunately, he is told that they didn't make it. Outside, we see that two people have come to visit him. They are Mike and Emma, and they are from the FBI. They want help with their investigation, so they ask several questions about who the attacker might have been. Joe doesn't say a single word, but Mike can tell that he is getting very angry. This is probably the worst time to be asking him questions, so Mike just leaves his card. Mike tells Emma that it's just a hunch, but he believes that Joe knows who the attackers are. He decides that they will take turns watching him, and Emma is first up as she watches Joe on the roof. Joe has a memory to just moments ago when he was taken to say goodbye to his family. The nurse found that he couldn't move Joe anymore, and it was because Joe put the brakes on the wheelchair. Joe shook with rage and couldn't bear to come any closer to his deceased family's bodies. Back on the roof, memories of his wife and son rush into his mind, and Joe begins to growl in anger. His rage reaches its boiling point, and he reaches for his wrist again, this time pulling out a metal needle. Joe pierces himself with it, and it does something strange to his body. Just then, Joe is attacked by several assassins. He is still filled with anger, so he goes berserk and expertly takes out several of the attackers. Joe shows overwhelming strength and precision as he somehow manages to take control of the fight. That isn't all though, as Joe does some kind of jutsu and turns his body into a black smoke. This move is incredibly powerful as it allows him to eliminate several assassins in one instant. Emma has no clue what's going on, but Joe doesn't help her find out and knocks her out instead. The enraged Joe then continues his relentless attack and goes on to tear several more attackers to pieces. There are a great number of them, and Joe strangely fires a sword at the elevator. We then see why he did this, as he uses a pole to defend himself and shoves all the remaining assassins into the elevator. Even though Joe is severely outnumbered, it becomes very clear that the assassins are trapped inside with him and not the other way around. Joe stands above all their corpses as he arrives at another floor, and he strikes fear into the hearts of any remaining opponents. Mike wonders why Emma isn't answering his call and is shocked when he finds several corpses. Joe finishes up nearby, and he is found by the assassin leader. Memories once again find their way into Joe's mind, so he attacks the leader with fury. This leader is obviously not like the others though, as he defends himself well and even manages to put a contraption around Joe's neck. Joe quickly frees himself, but the fight continues to be evenly matched. Joe eventually uses his shadow skill again though, and it allows him to land a devastating attack. Joe quickly follows this up with even more strikes, and the fight is over soon after. Joe demands to know how they found him and his family, and how they knew it was really him. The leader mockingly remarks that Joe can change his appearance as much as he wants, but he will never be able to escape his fate. Joe then shocks this guy and removes his disguise. Joe doesn't say a single word from here and just ends the leader's life. Joe then goes to see his family. He can hardly bear to look and he collapses to his knees. Afterwards, Joe returns home and drills a hole into a wall. He removes a box he had hidden, and we see that it contains several items including a mask. Joe stares at a picture that once again floods his mind with memories of his family. We get one last look at his family home just before Joe sets it on fire. Joe watches as his once love-filled and peaceful life burns away, and he puts on the mask. The fire consumes every last memory, but we see that Joe is still filled with anger. Thanks for watching my recap. Subscribe and sign up to my free newsletter if you want to show some support to the channel. Link is in the description.